Today, I am talking with Allie Carter, and she is a follower of Jesus with a heart for helping others and wants to be a part of helping them heal and guide through the heart of God to find the love of God and His vision for their lives. And she has a lot to teach us today about where to put our identity.
Welcome to the Sifted Wheat Podcast with Leslie Lamb, a counselor by profession, a minister of truth, and a lover of people. This is a safe place where she sets a path for others to learn how to move through hard seasons with confidence and grace, encouraging your faith, empowering your choices, and challenging your perceptions through the Word, the wisdom from years of counseling others, and her own experience of being sifted. Here's Leslie.
So, Allie, I am really excited to have you here today. And I said this off mic too, and I'll say it again. I'm excited to hear your story because I met you at an event, the place that I work with. We had a fundraiser, and I met you there, and you just had such a bubbly spirit, but authentic. You know, a lot of times as Christians, we can show up in spaces like that and we put on joy, but it's not always authentic. I want to be careful with that. But truly, when I met you, it was like this just joy that was bubbling out of you and excitement about sharing what God had done in you and through you. And then you got up on stage and you just shared a little bit of your testimony. And I just heard the Spirit of the Lord say, invite her on Sifted Wheat. And that was really before I even knew that we were doing a season on identity. So this is going to be a fun conversation because I'm not really sure where you have struggled with that and where the trap of identity has been for you. So I'm really excited to hear more about that with you. And because we're doing a season on identity, every time we have an interview, I've been asking the same question, and that is, who do you say that you are?
Yeah, listen, that is such a loaded question. It's very deep. And if I'm honest, if you would have asked me even about a year to a year and a half ago, my answer would have been, I literally do not know. Because I've never been someone that has taken what I've done and been like, well, this is who I am. I've never felt that. But I'm like, well, if that's not who I am, then who am I? And it's really within this last year to a year and a half where I can literally say with confidence, who am I? I'm a daughter of God.
And that's rooted and strengthened. I think a lot of times people hear that who aren't Christians and they say, well, that's kind of a cop-out. You're a daughter of God. But what they don't understand is how deeply that is rooted in my identity. It's not like I'm just saying this is a role that I play. But that as we become more and more connected to God, that truly does become the holding piece for everything else that we are and everything else that we do and everything else that we might even think. And it is a loaded question, but it's loaded with possibility.
Yeah, for sure.
And I love that. And, identity is definitely one of those spaces that's always under attack. I mean, we see it constantly in our culture. Who are you? You are this, always telling us who we are, but very little invitation to discover that with God. And so, I don't say that lightly in the sense that we're under attack, because I think a lot of times people can overemphasize that. But I do believe, and my listeners know, that we live in a spiritual world and a physical world, and that what we're meant to do in this physical world is often tried to be distracted or destroyed by a spiritual world that is often against us. And it is also the space where Jesus was tested in his identity, right? Because he had just been baptized. This always blows my mind. He'd just been baptized, had this awesome divine super encounter where the Holy Spirit shows up. God speaks from the clouds and says, "This is my son in whom I am well pleased." And it says that the Spirit led Jesus into the wilderness. And in the wilderness, after 40 days of fasting, the enemy shows up with this question: if you are the Son of God. And he's doing the same thing with all. If you are a daughter of God, Allie, then what are you going to do about that? If you are, then you know this, right? And no, if I am, then I'm at peace with what I know and what I don't know, what I do and what I don't do. And so if Jesus could be tested in this area, my gosh, then we're all going to be tested in this area, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And the enemy tempts us to see our identity as a means to an end, but God intended it in order to guide our life. So all that to say, where do you see the temptation of identity at work in your own story?
Yeah, well, I think it's very clear that in this, Satan is like, well, if you are a son, if you are a daughter, then prove it, right? But when you're secure in your identity, you have nothing to prove because you know that you're his, right? And so I think for me, this is a space that I've really grown and matured in the last couple of years, because it's like I would see God move in my life and I would immediately feel like, oh, I have to post this on social media for approval. Like I need people to see and validate that God is working in me. He's moving in me. When in reality, like that validation comes from him. Like I have nothing to prove. I can just rest in knowing who I am in him and trust that he's going to make all things beautiful in his timing,
I think that is a strong temptation. Am I sharing this so that people see something in me? Or am I sharing this because I want them to see something in him? And there is a difference in that.
Right.
We live in a social media culture that we can largely believe that that is our identity, but it is not. And a lot of times we can post things that we ourselves don't actually even believe. Maybe we want to believe them. It sounds like a good thing, but we're not actually living our life in a way that we believe that and that it is part of who we are. I loved that you brought up the social media aspect of that, because a lot of times that is where we think that we're projecting our identity. And so in your own journey, where was the space that you got lost in your identity or were tempted to get lost in your identity? What would the enemy try to convince you was the means to your end?
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's just so much of I just didn't know who I was. And I think especially in the beginning, because I got saved when I was 14, and it was radical. And so when I got saved, I was all in. I was like, I want to tell everybody about Jesus. I started making videos. I started speaking in churches. And I think in the beginning, I lost my identity in that because it was more about what I could do for God rather than just being with him. And so that's a space where I saw myself like, I was doing all these things for the Lord, but it felt like I was so far away from him at the same time.
What was the indicator to you that you were away from him?
I think because I just felt empty. It's like I saw myself pouring out, but at the end of the day, I didn't feel full.
Yeah. And what were the things that the enemy tempted you into to try to fill that void?
Honestly, I don't know. I think a lot of it was just performance, like and striving, and like I have to do the next thing. I have to speak at the next thing. I have to make this next video and do this and do that and do that to even convince myself that I was close to the Lord,
Mm-hmm. And where did you hit rock bottom in that? Like, where did the truth start to be presented to you? And where did that journey take you?
I think it's been this journey over the past 5 years of really digging into who the Lord says that I am, replacing all these lies that I believed with the truth of Scripture, renewing my mind, and really getting an understanding of who God is. Like, I'm not doing this out of performance. I'm not doing this because I have to. Like, I'm doing this because I'm in relationship with him and I want to do it, rather than, oh, this is something you have to do.
Yeah, and I love that. Even as you're talking to me, the listeners can't see it, but there's scripture verses that are posted on the wall behind you, not just I have these words and I look to the Bible and I read these words, but like I'm posting these words to live out of, that I'm constantly reminded this is the truth of God. This is your identity in Christ. This is what you're moving towards. This is what he says you are and what he says that you can do. So that's powerful. And so even as you're communicating that, like I'm seeing the reflection of that literally on the wall behind you.
Yeah.
So what brought that journey of faith? Like, okay, you're recognizing I'm performing, I'm doing these things. It's not filling me up. I'm pouring out for others, but there's something missing inside myself. What was that big revelation for you? What kind of took you to the bottom of that? And then how did Christ call you back into truth, into the relationship?
Yeah, I love that. So when I was 18, I had just graduated high school and I knew I had a call of ministry on my life. And so the thing that anyone would do is, okay, I'm going to go to Bible college. And so I went to a Bible college in Minnesota, which is like very far from Kentucky where I live. And side note, I just want to say, I thought, well, me creating all this distance between me and where I experience the most pain, like I can outrun it. So I'm going to go as far as I can to go to college. And I get there, and once I'm in this Christ-centered community, I'm safe. And suddenly all this trauma that I thought that I had buried started to come out. And I'm like, okay, I'm in trouble. And so I kind of went in this process of like realizing, it's so crazy because I had never gotten high, I had never done drugs. And one day the thought came across my mind that I should shoot up heroin. And I'm like, well, where did that come from? Because I don't even know how to get heroin. Like, hello. So that was kind of my indicator of there's something deep that is going on that I need to figure out. And so through this process, I also felt like God was telling me, hey, you are called to ministry, but as many people as you can help, you can also hurt if you don't heal first. And so it's like you can go and you can be successful in ministry for a season, but that's only going to sustain you so much because you're not sustained through me. And so you can go, but one day you're going to have a fall because you're just not going to have a firm foundation. And so it was through this that the Lord led me to a program where I got rooted in Him. I found my identity. Like I spent 14 months literally being poured into and uprooting all the things that I had believed my entire life. And so it was kind of there that the foundation was built. And I graduated there about 5 years ago. And so it's like, now you have this foundation, but now you got to build on it, right? Like, okay, here's your foundation, but now you got to build on it. And so it's just kind of been this journey of walking this out with the Lord. And I wish I could say, oh, there's one moment where everything shifted. There's one moment where I was this way and now I'm this way. But really, it was just one moment after one moment, one after one moment, like one little step after one little step of trusting Him and spending time with Him and being in His presence. And it's like all those little moments. One day I woke up and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm a daughter of God. Okay, how did that happen? You know? But it's just this consistency of the Lord and how He's walked me through this path and the places I've been and the people that He's surrounded me with. Like it's all these little moments that have got to this huge revelation of, wait a minute, you are a daughter of God. You don't have to strive. Like your identity is in me. And so it's just been a beautiful journey, truly.
And I think the point that you made there is one that we really need to sit with, is that if we don't heal as ministers of truth, then we're going to hurt people, and not even intentionally, right? Not even maliciously. But if my wounds are still open and bleeding, even if I've put a Band-Aid over them, but they seep through that Band-Aid, especially when you have to do ministry to people who are broken and have their own issues and triggers and things like that. But I want to ask you, because you indicated that there was some trauma in your past that kind of resurfaced. You thought you would run from it, right? Because you're leaving the place that all of the trauma happened and you're moving to a new place with a new purpose, but it met you there.
Yeah.
And so I want to ask you, like, in your understanding and reflection of those two things, a lot of times it's the messages that are formed by trauma that try to meet us in our relationship with God. Are you aware of what was that message of trauma that just was like converted into ministry, but was still a false message?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of my trauma stemmed from my dad. And so I didn't realize it at the time, but I had put all these things in the way that I had viewed my natural father, I had put them onto God. And so it was like, God is unapproachable, God is mean, God is manipulative, all these things that I didn't even realize that I'm coming to God and I have all these thoughts in the back of my head. But it's like, as I started to see the character of God, I'm like, wait a minute. No, you are consistent. No, you are trustworthy. No, you're really patient and you're actually very kind. You're actually a really good dad. Okay. But it's just like this place of like, because of my experience, I viewed God through a wrong lens. And when that lens was corrected, that's when everything changed.
That's so good. And I'm just curious. So if those were the aspects that you saw in your earthly father, which we had a conversation with Rachel a couple months by the time this airs, but it's those messages about our Father that meet us in our experience with God unconsciously. It's not like we're trying to transfer or project. But I'm wondering, because I'm a counselor, I'm sorry, that's the brain that I have. So when your father was being mean, when he was being manipulative, did you feel like performance was the thing that would bring appeasement or would bring peace? Did you feel like you had to do for him in order for him to be not disappointed in you?
Right, just kind of keeping the peace, like keeping it level and like not stepping on any toes, just kind of going with the flow, and whatever happens that day happens that day.
Right. And so because there's that performance with your earthly father, then you can start to project that need of performance with your heavenly father too. As long as I'm doing what he wants me to do, as long as I'm keeping the peace, as long as I'm obeying, the scriptures or reaching out to people, being helpful to people, then he'll be pleased with me. And I think, when we do that, God is like, okay, I'm going to have to take that out of you because that's going to lead you astray and it's going to lead others astray. And so,
right.
And I just want our listeners to hear that we can do that. Like, not only can we project the idea of who God is based on what we experience with our earthly parent, but also the messages that we learned we can project into our relationship with God. And so thank you for, being honest and being vulnerable with that. And I was just thinking, we started the season with the foundation that we are created by God with purpose. And that can't be confused as that can be confused as our identity. Our purpose can be confused as our identity.
Right.
So how do you hold yourself steady from falling back into that trap?
Yeah, this is something that actually within the last year I've come face to face with, because so last year was like my redemption year. It was like the Lord was restoring my voice. He was opening door after door. And in that, there was tons of opportunity, like out of nowhere. I'm like, 1 minute I'm just laying in my bed, not doing nothing. And then the next thing I'm speaking in 5 different states and got asked to put my testimony in a book. And I'm like, what is going on? And it's awesome and it's exciting. But what's so funny is when I got home in December after all this ended, I realized that I felt so empty. And I'm like, God, why? Why do I feel so empty? It's like everything I've ever dreamed of, I've just walked out. And yet I feel so empty. And so I was like, okay, I got to get alone with the Lord. I got to pray. I got to see what's going on. And I felt like he told me that intimacy will take you further than gifting ever will. Mm-hmm. And that broke me. I started sobbing and I was repenting and I was like, Lord, you're so right, because it's out of that place again of like, beyond anything that you can do for him, he's just asking you to be. And so it's just this place of even my mindset of ministry within the last year has changed. It's like I've seen all this stuff and it's amazing and it's great. But also, if I'm not in that secret place with him, if I'm not being sustained, like I'm not going to be able to make it, because like a good job and applause and all that, it'll hold you over for maybe 5 minutes. But when that's over, like, who are you? Where are you getting your substance from? Like, is it the Lord? And so that's like where I've been, is just really seeing that shift in my life of like, yes, opportunity is great and it's awesome. But beyond being used in the gifts, like you need to be in that secret place with the Lord if you're going to be sustained.
That is so good and so important. The world is definitely trying to conform us into its image, right? And the patterns that it holds acceptable. And a lot of times those patterns aren't just in the world, but they're in religion too, right? And I think that when we can be honest with, okay, this experience is fulfilling in the sense of people are listening to me, I'm getting attention, I'm getting applause, I'm feeling successful by the world's standards and, even by religious culture standards.
Right.
But at the end of the day, tapping into what's happening internally that isn't congruent with all that's going on out here. And for you to be able to pull back and say, okay, wait a minute, hold on. God, something feels empty. So that leans me back into the one that fills me. So do you have like a question that you use as kind of that litmus test? Because a lot of times it helps sometimes to have scripts. I'm a big believer in scripts because that script can pull us back into getting out of the emotion, but back into, okay, cognition, what am I thinking? And then that thinking can move us deeper into the spiritual. Like, for instance, for me, that question is, okay, God, what's the most important thing that you want me to see in this? Right? And so that's the thing when I'm starting to feel overwhelmed and worked up, when I'm starting to put my trust in something that's not Him, I'll ask, okay, God, what's the most important thing that you want me to know about this or see? And that is kind of the cue for me to silence myself, press in, and to hear from Him. So is there anything that is kind of the cue for you that gets you to press in, or does that just seem like a weird question?
I think like there's this place in me that always questions like, am I doing this out of am I doing this out of obligation, or am I doing this because I feel like this is something you've called me to? Like, is this even my space that I need to operate in? Because that's a big thing. Like, you can say yes to all these things, but the real question is that where God has you? And so that's kind of been my question of like, am I just saying yes out of obligation, or am I saying yes because this is something that you've given me a grace for?
Yeah, because that's a big distinction. And the fact that you're willing to do that, I mean, you're very young and you're really just launching into that space. And for you to already be where you're sitting with the Lord, not just jumping at opportunity, but recognizing, okay, is this a God opportunity or a good opportunity, right? What's going to lead me deeper into my relationship with the Lord versus what's going to increase my influence in the world around me or the community around me? And some people might say, well, isn't that antithesis? I mean, wouldn't God want you to do more to influence the world around you? And what would you say to that?
I'd say no, not everything is your portion for real. You're going to wear yourself out real quick.
Absolutely. And that's so good because what we say yes to, we're saying no to something else. And so you might say yes to a big opportunity, but there might be a more intimate opportunity that you miss out because you said yes to the obligation instead of waiting for the calling or the inspiration. So what would you say to people who are struggling in that area where they're seeing their ministry and purpose as their identity rather than recognizing that it's a part of what we're called to do, but not ideally who we are?
Yeah, honestly, maybe just take a season and step back and really realize where your priorities lie. Like for me, a couple years ago, I felt like God was like, for where I'm taking you right now, I need you to be off social media. And so I was so bad about, I deactivate my account, but deactivating it, all you got to do is put your password back in and you're right back on it. And so that didn't work out for me. And so that year I was like, if this is really what I'm going to do and this is what the Lord has told me I need to do, I have to permanently delete my accounts because that's the only way that I'm not going to do it. And it's kind of embarrassing just to make another account and then add all these people and delete them just to delete it again. So I was like, that was kind of my barrier of like, okay, I'm really going to do this. And it was honestly that year off of social media. I mean, God was doing crazy, awesome things in my life, but not having that desire to be like, oh, I'm going to publicize what God is doing in my life. Like taking this step back and realizing what my motives truly were was really, really, really beneficial, was taking that step off of social media. And honestly, social media has been a space that I've struggled with for so long because it's like I've seen the fruit of it and I've seen God use it, but also I've seen how it's been detrimental to me because I'm like, if I could just post and not scroll, I would be perfectly fine. But I can't do that. It's like I'm posting and then I'm scrolling and I'm consuming and then I'm consuming all this stuff that I shouldn't even be consuming. And so that's kind of been a space where I've been trying to find a balance, and I've not necessarily found it yet, but I'm getting better. I'm getting there where I'm not posting as much, I'm not scrolling as much. But if I really feel like there's something that the Lord is like, okay, post this, then I'll post it.
That is so good. And that's, my journey too. And if you are friends with me for long, you're going to hear me say, like, I have a love-hate relationship with social media. And honestly, like, if it were not for this podcast, I would not be in this space, just because I don't need it to verify my life outside of here. And, in fact, I don't post a lot about my private life. And we're having a lot go on right now. My daughter is getting married. She's graduating from college, which is a big thing. We're potentially moving. All of these things would be things that people would be posting and talking about, and family get-togethers and all the pictures. And I'm just horrible with that. But then I always, when I say that, I feel like the Lord's like, are you horrible with that? Or is it just not your value? And so I think a lot of times we value the external, and God has just had me in this place of like, I see through the external. Like, I value the internal.
Right.
And I even just posted today, speaking of posting, just because I'd sat with it for days, and I just felt like the Lord was like, hey, you can post that. Like, that is what I'm saying to you, and that is important. But it was in Acts 15, I've been reading the Hebrew literal translation, and where Paul is talking to the people, and he communicates that we have a heart-knowing God. And I just love that so much. And God has just really been unpacking that lately, like a heart-knowing God, meaning he knows our hearts. He knows our actions from our hearts. He knows our thoughts, regardless of our actions. And so I think it like comes back into that space of renewing the mind. Then that way we might know God's will, his good, pleasing, and perfect will for us.
Right.
And so it sounds like there was a part of you that was operating in your own will. I want to do this. I want to be this for God. And God was like, hey, I don't need you to be or do anything for me. I just want you to do this with me.
Right.
And the peace that comes from knowing that.
For sure. And that's huge, like doing it with me. Like, hey, this is a partnership. It's not just, oh, you do all this, oh, I do all this. It's like together, which is beautiful.
It is so beautiful. And, I've said this before on my podcast, especially in the first season where I was talking about like detangling my faith and the things that have held me in captivity. And one of those was a language that we use sometimes without thinking about it. I'll find myself falling back into the language, but that God uses us. And if we've ever been used by people, like that's a painful thing. That's a selfish thing.
Right.
And so I found that when I was communicating, God used me, I would pull back from that because, okay, but what are you going to ask me to do? Right. Because as someone who was molested, that's like, you used me and you asked me to do something that now I'm having to sit with the repercussions of. And that translated into my relationship with the Lord. Like, I want you to use me, but at the same time, there's this hesitation that says, what are you going to ask of me? What are you going to require of me that's going to hurt me? And I think that's where that really trips us up, but where the language of partnership becomes so freeing.
That's beautiful.
So where does that switch for you, right? Like, I'm not being used by God, but I'm partnering with God to do what he values, what he prioritizes.
I love it because I feel like there's absolutely no pressure. Like the season of life I'm in, I'm like, I'm just riding the wave. I'm like, Lord, whatever it is, like, let's just do this. And I love it because it's like, there's no pressure to perform. There's no pressure to get it right. But it's just like, I trust him. I know him. And he's like taken everything that the enemy meant for evil and he's used it for good. So I'm like, Lord, everything you're doing is good. And so I just want to partner with you in whatever it is that you're doing. And I love it too, because it's like, he cares about our desires. He cares about what we're passionate about. So it's not just, oh, God, what can I do for you? But it's like, how can I use the gifts that he's given me in partnership with him to fulfill the purpose and the call in my life,
Yeah. So what does that look like now in this season? What are you partnering with God to do?
Well, it's so funny because I'm like, he always leads you in the place that you least expect. And so really the last 2 years of my life have looked insanely different, because this month actually will be 2 years since I quit my full-time job, because I felt like God said, hey, I'm going to provide for you and I need you to trust me, and I'm going to be taking you on a journey. Mm-hmm. And a journey he has. And it's been so beautiful of like stepping out in faith and watching him provide. Like, I really feel like I'm in my daily bread season. It's like the Lord provides exactly what I need for today. I'm not worrying about tomorrow. I'm not worrying about yesterday. It's just like provision today, provision today. And that's also an area where I've grown in seeing his character of like, he asked me to do this. I knew and recognized his voice, so I knew it was him. And I've seen him fulfill what he said that he was going to do. Mm-hmm. So the last 2 years have just been this crazy journey. And so right now, this season that I'm in, is I'm actually traveling with a ministry that's doing tent revivals in different cities. Wow. And so that's kind of the new thing that like the Lord just opened the door, and I'm like, okay, here I am. They're like, hey, you want to do social media for us? I'm like, sure. So here we are.
That's awesome. That's great. And so you're using the thing that you're gifted at for others, basically. For yourself, obviously, right. For God, yes. But it's not about what Allie's doing and what God has Allie doing, but more about what God is doing through his kingdom and through the big C church, not just the little C church.
Right.
Yeah. I love that. That's so good. So if somebody is listening and they are struggling in that place of connecting to God, to know their identity, what is something that you would encourage them to do or to be or to think through?
Honestly, to just keep pressing in. Like, I wish that there was some like elegant thing that I could say that would be like, oh yeah, now I know my identity. But it's just this place of like being in his presence and being molded by him. Like, you know, we're the clay and he's the potter. And sometimes that don't feel too great, but at the end it's something beautiful. And it's just this place of being with him, doing the next right thing that you know to do. And that's huge, because for so long I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this and then everything's going to be okay. But it's this day by day process. And even where I am right now, I'm still in a place where I need to rely on the Lord. It's not like, oh, you arrive and then you don't have to keep pursuing him or doing all these things. It's like a constant lifestyle of being in his presence, worship, in the word. And he's faithful in that. Like, it is a journey. And I just think truly, if your heart's in the right place and that is your desire, like, God is going to see you through in that place.
So a lot of times, you know, we use language that can be confusing for somebody who really doesn't have a relationship with the Lord or has just begun their relationship. So when you say press in, how do we press in? Like, what is that? I mean, it looks like reading the word, worship, you know, those are actions that we can do in order to engage something that's more spiritual.
Yeah. And I think even like finding community and people to be around that are at the place that you want to be, I think is really, really important. Like someone that can pour into you and be like, hey, this is my journey. This is how I got here. Because one thing we're not meant to do is walk this thing out alone. You could try, but it's probably not going to work out too well for you in the end. But to be surrounded by people who are even in the midst of their own journeys, I think has been something that's been so beneficial for me, is to see, okay, we're all in process. Where you are on that process is a different place, but we're all in process and coming together. There's just something so beautiful about that. So I would say, honestly, just try to find and surround yourself with a community of people that are like, this is where I want to be. And it's a lot easier to get there when you're surrounded by people that have been where you are and are where you want to be now.
I love that you brought up community, because a lot of times we can feel like we're in isolation, that we have to figure this out on our own. We have to make our own way. And that is not true. That, you know, one of the things that God said when he created man was it's not good for man to be alone. That isolation is where the enemy can bring a lot of disruption. And so, yes, community, accountability, support, encouragement. If we're going to walk with God, we need those things, and he knows it. And also what you said, like being around people who prioritize those things. We cannot do it on our own. And, there may be seasons of isolation and separation where God is like, hey, I want to call you to myself.
Right.
But then he always calls us back into community. He never just keeps us there in isolation. He always says, okay, now that I've filled you, I talk a lot about, I don't know if I've actually talked about it on here, but like in my story with the Lord and my journey of true identity and being sifted and coming through that is, God had me in what I call the cocoon season, where it was just me and him. And it was so beautiful. I was a stay-at-home mom at the time, so it was just even more immersive, right? Because my kids were in school. And when they were in school, it was just me and the Lord. And it was just the most beautiful, profound, poignant place in my life. And I remember after that, I probably lasted about 3 months of just me and him and isolation and separateness. And I also read a really good book by, I can't remember who the author is, but it is called Anonymous, I think it's what it's called. And it was talking about Jesus's anonymous years that prepared him, strengthened him for his journey that he had to do. It's like Alyssa Britt Cole or something like that, maybe. It's a great book. If you have not read that book, because it really does just highlight the temptations of Christ and how we fall into those same temptations when we are making our life about purpose and doing rather than just being. So it's a great resource if anybody wants to check it out.
No, I relate to that so much though.
But after that 3 months of just kind of being in that cocoon, it was very clear that God was like, okay, it's time to launch. And I'd be like, no, I just want to stay larva in the cocoon. And God was like, no, but I created you to be a butterfly. This was just a season.
Yeah, I relate to that because I feel like I said, these last 2 years have just been so crazy and like the Lord had me hidden. And then it's like I'm starting to see the Lord break me out of, like you said, the cocoon. And I was like, at first I was like, are you sure? Like, now's the time. I kind of got comfortable in here. But it's like now I'm like, okay, I'm out of the cocoon. I'm out of the cave. Like, let's do this thing. But there is that real hesitation there of like, are you sure, Lord? Like, I know you said you were preparing me and now I'm ready, but are you sure I'm ready?
Yes. Absolutely. And then, the temptation of our soul, the enemy will, try to convince us to get back in those old patterns that we tried to leave behind, and that's where we have to resist the temptation. And so it sounds like you are resisting that by being connected to God and being reminded of who you are, not just what you have the ability to do, which is great. But at the end of the day, who you are is going to make a bigger impact on the world than what you do. So we've been talking a lot too in this series about hearing from God and the importance of that in our journey. And so has there been an experience that you've had where you felt like God was speaking directly into that space of identity?
Yeah, so actually a couple months ago, I had a dream, and in it was a well-known minister. And at the end, I walked up to her, and the only question I had was, what does it take to have longevity in ministry? And then she looked at me and she just said, well, who are you? And I'm like, I paused for a minute because your natural inclination is to say, oh, well, I'm Allie. But there was something inside of me that was like, no, you need to respond differently. And so when I looked at her, I said, I'm a daughter of God. And then she looked at me and she smiled and she said, that's it, knowing whose you are.
That is so good. And I love how he can speak to us and get our attention and just even remind us things. I think a lot of times we're afraid of what God's going to say because we think it's going to be a command or a demand. But most often it's just a confirmation of what we already are and who we already are. And so that was just God's way of reminding you, like, hey, if you want to get there, this is how you do it. You just remember that you're mine.
Yeah, for sure.
So good. So is there any way that, first of all, this has been a great conversation, and I just have really enjoyed getting to know you better and hearing your relationship with the Lord. And I think a lot of times in interviews, like we focus on the trauma, we focus on the bad parts of our story, which is not altogether a bad thing, but I think sometimes we can sit there too long. And what I love about my conversation with you is that you you addressed that there were problems and that there was trauma, but the main thing that you wanted to focus on is how God has met you and brought you out of that. And I think that makes this conversation just really powerful.
Yeah.
And I pray that people are listening and can see that, hey, you don't have to stay stuck in the things that deformed you. You can walk in the things that are re-informing you and your identity. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's huge too. That's something that I've grown in a lot, was like realizing that the trauma is not my identity. Like, it is a part of my story and it's great to share. But like you said, it's not really necessary to sit here and talk about all of the things. I'd rather sit here and tell you how the Lord has redeemed it. And so that's kind of a shift even in the way that I've shared my story in the past couple of years, is like, I've not been so trauma focused, but I've been so, look at how the Lord has redeemed it.
That is so good. I love that. So I know that you're, we've talked about where you are with social media, but if somebody wanted to connect with you, if somebody wanted to hear more about your story or have encouragement from you, how could they connect with you? What is something that you would share with us about where you are and where we can find you?
Yeah, so I do have Instagram, so it's Allie Faith Carter, and then also Facebook, just Allie Carter. Facebook is my preferred method of social media. But yeah, you can connect with me on either of those.
Okay, great. Well, Allie, I'm really excited for what you're doing with ministry and tent revivals. Let's bring that back. That's awesome. And just thank you so much for just being vulnerable and open and just sharing what God is doing through you and how you're partnering with Him. And just keep it up. I encourage you to just keep pursuing Him, pressing into Him, being His daughter, and all these things will be added unto you.
Amen and amen.
Okay, so if you're listening and you want to connect more with Sifted Wheat, you can find us on Instagram. You can find me, Leslie Lamb, on Facebook. We're going to be talking more about identity as we go. I'm going to take a little bit of a break. My daughter got married and we're moving and there's just a lot going on, but consistently I'm showing up, but not always on time. That makes sense. So if you like what you hear, share it with others. You can give us a rating or review so others might find us. And I hope, as always, that you are doing your part to seek God and to heal. Until next time.